In the midst of City Connect Jersey 2.0 being released and people falling off the list going to the minor leagues, and who do we start, Zach DeCenzo or Cam Smith? Myself and Mike Stanton want to bring you back to the bullpen so we can discuss it right now.
I'm looking to the bullpen to bring my lefty in. Keep the lead and make your team look pedestrian. It's in your wheelhouse, we'll swing for the fence. You know it's money around here, man, I ain't talking expense. Strike one, heat low in the way, you can't hit it. You know you want to start a rally, but you better forget it. Strike two, off speed, same spot, your car looking. Get ready at the plate, this time you're not cooking. Strike three, swinging out of the zone. You ain't even touch it first. Tell me how they gonna drive you home. Walking back, looking like we ain't cool then. The game's over, might as well put them back to the bullpen, oh yeah.
Hey guys, thank y'all for tuning in to another edition of Back to the Bullpen. I'm H-Town Wheelhouse and he's Mike Stanton. Look, you can find me at H-Town Wheelhouse on X, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find the show Back to the Bullpen on YouTube, on iHeartRadio, on Instagram, and on X, and on Spotify. And Mike, tell everybody where they can find you, sir.
Well, there is only one place, and that is on X. It is at Mike Stanton 29. Hey, baseball season is right around the corner, and you know what that means. I have my baseball. We are ready to go.
I love it. And look, Tiki52 says I'm about to put my lefty in.
There you go.
And that is a reference to you. That is awesome. And man, we've got some things to talk about because look at this comment at the top of the page. Can we please release Chaz McCormick? There is a lot of talk about fans that are frustrated.
The folks are going at us hard at the beginning.
Yes, they are. I mean, you know, Mike, you always tell me to exercise patience.
Sure.
And I think I've gotten better. We'll see. We'll do an all-star mid-season recap of Wheelhouse's patience, and I'll let you aptly criticize that.
We are all a work in progress.
Yes, we are. We are. Yes, sir. But hey, you know, Mike, it's great to have you on. I mean, we're a week away from 2025.
We're there, man. We are there.
And before we get into the nitty gritty, before we get into little Mike's Mechanics segment where we talk about Lance McCullers and him being back on the mound and what was cool about him being there, his wife and his kids were there. And I mean, it was, you know, that's a moment, and you can hit on that, what that's like for a player to come back from an injury, especially being out that long. Mm-hmm. But I think 2025 has so many storylines. And I kind of touched on this a little bit at the end of my Locked on Astros segment. With Dawson Iserloh, is that you've got a very thick plot. There are so many different things that the Astros could do. I had my friend Walt tell me this the other day. He said the Astros have a possibility of winning 75 games or 95 games. He goes, that's how like much of a spectrum you could have. Be dealing with injuries. Are these guys going to stay healthy? Who's going to contribute? So 2025, I think, is going to be one of the most exciting seasons we've had to date.
Yeah, I think 95 wins may be a little bit of a stretch.
Right.
But I understand the sentiment, and I don't disagree. I mean, this is a team that you look at what happened last year. They got lucky last year. Let's just say it how it is. The way they started the season, they had no business even being 500, much less winning the division. And they had help. Now, they played very well. And, you know, if you remember, they really got back in the race in like 3.5 weeks. It was crazy that they played so well that coincided with the Seattle Mariners tanking again. And so it was one of those situations that you just don't see a team be as bad as the Astros was. And it was an extended period of time. We're not talking about just a week or two. I mean, we're talking about it was like almost the first month.
Yeah.
Or a little more than the first month. And then for them to win the division and play as well as they did, I think that was a testament to Joe Espada and how, you know, he kept everything together. He kept everybody pulling on the same end of the rope. And if you remember, there was talk at the beginning of the season that he was over his skis, that he had lost the clubhouse, that he had done this, he had done that.
Right.
What did he do? He just stayed status quo, stayed positive, and the team turned it around. we always say before every opening day, and I'll say it now, and I'll probably say it again as we get into April. You can't win the division in April, but you sure can lose the division in April. The Astros tried last year, but let's not tempt fate again.
They did. I was at opening day. I don't want to see another sweep by another New York team.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Soto 2.0. But check this out. Susan says, Mike, my husband asked once, why does that guy always hold a baseball? I told him it's because you're a pitcher. It just feels right.
That has got something to do with it. It is a prop. It is I do use it on television. I would use it to, show different pitches and stuff like that. It's a nice paperweight. And it is definitely a talking point. I'll tell you what, there's times I think people want to talk about the baseball more than anything else I do.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So speaking of baseballs, speaking of holding baseballs, and speaking about throwing baseballs, Lance McCullers Jr., it had been almost like 930 something days or 80 something days.
Two and a half plus years
on the mound. As a former pitcher, as a former relief pitcher for 19 years, is that a moment of almost like a huge adrenaline rush for him? And what did you like out of his performance? It was 13 pitches. But I would like.
You'll take that for a full inning any day of the week.
100%.
Yeah. So what I liked about it more than anything else was that everyone realized what Lance had been through. I mean, all the trials and tribulations, all the stress. I would almost guarantee that he was nervous, even for a spring training game. Dude hadn't pitched in 2.5 years. Yeah. October 22 was the last time he pitched. There were multiple arm issues. I know he came back. He was coming back from the surgery in 23, but that's not the same issue he was having when he went down in 22. He's a guy that's had a lot of injuries all the way through his career. He has yet to pitch a full season in Major League Baseball. But what I liked was the fact that he threw strikes. Velocity was fine. Velocity was where it usually is. There's a little bit of talk that his arm angle may have been just a touch lower than it was before. I think that's everyone just kind of nitpicking. I love the fact that his whole family was there. I love the fact that the team, basically gave him a standing ovation when he was coming off the field. Everyone realized exactly what was going on. There had to be many, many days that Lance had to be thinking, you know what, my baseball career may be over. I just may not come back from this because it had been so long. So I think see the work he put in. Now, does one inning mean that he's back? No, I don't think so. He's going to start. I would be surprised if he doesn't start in the minor leagues. He'll be on a rehab assignment. They're going to have to extend him. What are the Astros how are they going to use him this year? I would have to think he would be a long guy out of the pen. I can't imagine him being back in the rotation, but heck, who knows? He may be that sixth swingman starter or something, but he's still got some work to do before he even gets to that point. It was just great to see Lance McCullers Jr. back on the mound.
Yeah, and I believe from what I've heard from Joe Espada and even Lance, I'm thinking a minimum of 2 to 3 starts in AAA. Now
I would say minimum, absolutely.
Yeah, and Lance, I believe, to me, in his mind, has dispelled him going into the relief role simply because he said, y'all make it sound like being a reliever is easier than being a starter. He said that's actually.
I've always said that. That is a statement that has been thrown around, and the bullpen is in many ways is much harder than being a starter.
And
now,
see, I think
because there's no script. You never know when you're going to throw. But true. I do think that it's a situation. Now, in the minor leagues, he's absolutely going to be a starter because they can control the process. He can control how long he wants to warm up. There is no urgency when he does that. And I think that he probably, when he does get back to Houston, fingers crossed that he stays healthy, he gets back into the Houston Astros uniform. I think it's probably still, at least at the beginning, going to be out of the bullpen as a long relief guy, meaning that he will have time to warm up. He'll have he'll be able to do
Right.
the things he needs to do. Go out there, throw multiple innings, and then he has multiple days off. The Astros very well at some point. Actually, I would be surprised if they don't. They will go to a 6-man rotation, and that might be when Lance is able to get back in the rotation. But it's going to be, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. He's still got some hurdles to cross before he can put on the Astros uniform. But it was just good to see him on the mound.
Well, and I remember talking to Jose Urquidy, talking to Justin Verlander after their rehab starts, and they always say, and every pitch, even Lance has said it, how will I feel tomorrow? That's always, it is not, okay, you can look good on the mound, but it's how do you feel the next day?
That's it.
And, we see a guy throwing a baseball on the mound pitching. We think, okay, it's a simple process. You're just basically playing catch or throwing. But there's a lot to it with the mechanics, with your muscles, doing things that your body hasn't done on a regular basis.
Recovery. I mean, that's the key. I mean, you look at, go to the Yankees and look and see what happened with Garrett Cole last spring training. That was when he started having his arm injuries. It took a whole year, and he pitched. It was an injury-laden year, and then, he has Tommy John this year. But it wasn't that when he was pitching, he had a problem. He wasn't recovering.
Yeah.
So that was one of the issues that said, okay, there's something going on. And so there's also psychological issues. Okay. There's a lot of hurdles that when you spend that much time on the IL, there is a lot of hurdles that you have to cross. And a large portion of those hurdles are not physical. They are actually mental hurdles that, at some point, now, like I said, his velocity was fine. He was in the low mid 90s, 93, 94 miles an hour. That's all good. That's right about where he was when he went down, when he was healthy. But, when you spend that much time on the IL, you have that many injuries, there are times that, you overthink every little ache and pain. Listen, there was not a day in Major League Baseball that's for myself, and I was blessed enough to play a very long time. There wasn't a day that something wasn't sore. Okay, arm, shoulder, back, knee. Had a bad day. Maybe it was my neck from giving up home runs. Whatever. There was always something. That's right. A little whiplash action. There is always something that was sore. And when you're coming back from injury, and I did this in 1990 with a shoulder injury. I missed all but the first 3 weeks of the season. You kind of just you overanalyze everything that happens. And, that's one of the things that, everybody has to go through. And I'm sure Lance has gone through some of this also.
Yeah, definitely. Before we move any further, we want to talk about ramshirts.com. You notice Mike and I are sporting our Back to the Bullpen with Mike and Brett shirt. You can get yours. I just got a DM from a guy on Instagram, said, I got my Back to the Bullpen shirt. I'm ready for opening day. That's what
you need more than one.
That's right.
I think you need 7. You need one for each day of the week.
One for each day of the week, one for each family member.
That's right.
We don't have Back to the Bullpen onesies, so you can't get one for the baby just yet. But
Can you folks imagine Brett in a onesie? Oh my goodness.
I'm in an actual baby.
Oh! I thought you were talking about baby. You want
no,
Back to the Future overalls or something.
I don't want to give Mark any ideas at Ram shirts because I'm sure he would ask me to promote that live on air. But
actually, what we want is to model it.
That's right. Okay. You know what? I will text Mark maybe next year about that. But seriously, the QR code is right there. And not only our shirt, you can get there, but you can get all kinds of stuff. And if you have a business, if you have promotions, if you need stuff, go to that QR code, purchase our shirt, go to the rest of the website, fill in your information for your business and check him out. And then also state-of-the-art barbershop. Ever has a new barber in shop. He's still looking for more barbers. So if you're looking for employment and you're a licensed barber in the state of Texas in the Friendswood area, go check out Ever 1616 South Friendswood Drive. Also tell them we sent you, get 10% off your next haircut and get cleaned up. That way you look good when you go to the ballpark. We're going to get to the City Connect uniforms here in a second, but this is the time of year in spring training where people are being offloaded to the minor leagues.
A lot of stress.
People that come on minor league contracts get told, thanks, good job, we'll see you later. But we actually have some major leaguers that I think might have their days numbered. And I think one of those guys is probably John Singleton, depending on who they want to carry as someone off the bench. Now, I know he's a left-handed bat. I know he's solid defensively with the glove. But Chaz McCormick he is the talk of the town right now, and probably not for the reasons he wants to be.
True.
He's really underperformed in spring training. We know it's spring training, but we want to know, the fans want to know, how long is the Chaz McCormick trying out going to work? And Cam Smith, Zach DeCenzo, there's so many questions. So I don't know, how do we unwrap this? Because I can't imagine what Dana Brown and Joe Espada are like, how they're not going crazy, because there's a lot of guys that depend on what the coach says.
Sure.
Yes, you're on the team or you're going to go to the minors.
So I'm not exactly sure what the date is, but a few days before opening day, there's a date that, guaranteed contracts, that if you're under a 1-year deal, there's a date that you have to get to in order for that contract to kick in. And I go back to, it was in the early 90s with Ron Gant and the Atlanta Braves, that I think he had won arbitration, or he had gotten, he was going to get paid like $6 million a year. And he had a motorcycle accident and he broke his leg. And the Astros, the Braves held on to him all the way to the end of spring training. And there was a couple dates all the way through spring that, it's 25% of the contract, it's 50% of the contract, it's 75%. And they ended up giving him a large portion of that contract before they finally released him. So, it's a situation that at some points you have to make a decision. And it's not just the lack of performance from Chaz in this spring training. He's coming off of a subpar year also.
Right.
And so, then you start weighing options. How much is he going to make? Now, he's not a guy that's making a whole lot of money anyways. But, any organization is going to save money where they can. And, with his lack of performance this spring, I think if I were Chaz, I would probably be worried. Now, hopefully that's not the case, because he is a fan favorite. People do like him, even though he hasn't performed well. He is a solid outfielder. And when he gets hot, you remember 2 years ago that, he was one of the more productive outfielders in the American League, believe it or not, he was.
Yeah.
So is that player still in there? How is he accepting the issues that he is? How is his work ethic, which I think his work ethic is just fine. He's probably working too hard. So these are all tough questions that have to be answered. And it's one of the reasons why there's so much stress at the end of spring training,
Oh yeah.
Everybody is excited, nervous for different reasons. Veteran players, hey, the beginning of the season's right around the corner. Let's get this party started. The young guys, am I going to be sent down? Am I going to make the roster? We'll talk about Cam Smith here in just a minute. The veteran guy that maybe is a backup, like Chaz McCormick. Okay, am I going to make this team? Am I going to be, do I have options left? There's just so many, there's countless things that can go on here. Right. So the only way we're going to be able to work through this is, time.
Right. And Chaz has one more option left, meaning this is his last
it could be.
Year. So this is his last year that he can go between minors and majors before he is into that. If he's not on your roster, you have to let him go, kind of thing.
Right.
And Mama Wheelhouse just gave her disapproval and said, H-Town, I don't ever want to see you in a onesie. So there you go. If mom is not going to see me in a onesie, doesn't matter what
That's
Mark
right.
wants.
That's right.
Doesn't matter what Mike wants. What mama wants.
She saw that a few decades ago, and she's
like,
she's out.
No,
I'm done. No.
It doesn't compute in my brain. But you know, that's
we'd have to make sure it's got the butt flap on it, though.
Oh God. I should have not. I debated in my head before.
You did. You set that up for me.
I walk right into it, just like an Aroldis Chapman slider to Jose Altuve in the playoffs, right? Just crush it.
You hang it, we bang it.
That's right, man. So, you know, that's interesting because, you know, the thing is, Chaz has been walking a lot. You know, he's got like 10 or 11 walks. He just hasn't been hitting. But then you got this guy, Zach Short, who's a utility backup guy infielder who's hitting 400. Yeah. You have Zach DeCenzo, who's hitting 415. You know, you have Cam Smith, who is really making it hard for the Astros to put him down. But there's only one other guy that is within the same amount of games spent in AA. Mike Trout spent 21. Now, Mike Trout skipped AAA, came up, came back down. But a lot of people are comparing, and not saying Joe Adell and Cam Smith are the same player, but Joe Adell, before he got called up, was highly touted. This guy was killing AA pitching. He was the next great star in Anaheim, and he came up, and Adell has not performed. And that's where I sit with Cam is I don't want to bring him up and mess with what he's got going on between the ears and ruin a kid who seems to have the poise, who seems to have the composure without, 19 or 20 at bats in AA. He has more at bats in spring training, Mike, than he does above high A. So to me, it seems prudent to
how this is going. And you got to remember, he's also learning a new position. You know, it would be one thing if he was playing third base because that's his natural position. But he's trying to learn right field. And, you know, I always say when a player, especially an athletic player, moves further away from home plate, so you go from the infield to the outfield, it's not really that hard of a transition because the game slows down. When you go the other way, when you go from the outfield to the infield, the game really speeds up. The ball is going very fast on the infield. But there's still some nuances he has to learn. And there's also a comfort factor. You know, at third base, he's always played third base, so he's comfortable at third base. Playing right field, you know, he's not going to be nearly as comfortable. Right. And, you know, you're talking about a guy that if you do make an opening day roster, there's always pressure. It doesn't matter where you bat. There's pressure to make an opening day when you make an opening day roster. The other thing I will say, you ask any veteran scout, they will tell. Now, it's a little bit different now because September call-ups, you only get a couple. You don't get, you know, you don't get 10 or 12 like it could have been, like it was a few years ago when you go all the way to the 40-man roster. But you always have to take what a player does in spring training and what a player does in September. I'm talking about young players. You got to take it with a grain of salt, okay? Because the sample size is very small. And, you know, is that player really as good? I mean, I go back to my Yankee years. I remember Shane Spencer came up in, I think it was 1997, and he hit 10 home runs in September. He looked like freaking Babe Ruth. And he ended up being a good major league player, but he wasn't ever an everyday starter. He wasn't ever an all-star. But I'll tell you what, in September that year, the dude was one of the most prolific home run hitters in baseball at the time. So, you gotta have to just go ahead.
Well, people forget Tyler White's first month in the major leagues.
Right. Yeah, he hit over three.
He was like 568.
He was player of the week of the American League, if you remember.
Yeah.
First week of the season.
He was killing it.
Yeah.
He just, you know, I remember, I don't know if I don't know if he was with the Yankees in the late 90s with you or if it was before, but Kevin Moss, do you remember Kevin Moss?
Never played with Kevin Moss.
Okay. Well, Kevin Moss came up and he was supposed to be the next like Jose Canseco, the next
Right.
Mickey Mantle. I think he hit like 15, 20 home runs, like really, really quickly as a Yankee his rookie year. And then poof.
Crickets.
Like Jerome Walton, rookie of the year.
Yep.
The very
Cubs.
first, get this, the very first ball that I caught, a foul ball that I caught my 14th birthday in the Astrodome, I had Jerome Walton signing on the sweet spot because I knew Jerome.
I think that was
Walton,
1989. That's when I made the big leagues.
Yeah. Jerome Walton was going to be, he was rookie of the year. He was going to be an all-star, and I was going to have this ball signed by it. Now it's just signed by, people are like, who's Jerome Walton?
You're
I'm
right.
like, he was great for a couple of years.
ROI. He had the Roy.
Yeah. So, but, Zach DeCenzo, though, I think has a higher chance, higher probability of making it because he's been up to the bigs, and he may be your starting right fielder. He may start over Chaz because right now Zach DeCenzo's hitting the cover off the ball.
Yeah.
And
that's how it's supposed to work. Whoever's hot should be in the game. And that's something that we've seen from the Astros, whether, like I said, it was 2 years ago, it was Chaz was, tearing the cover off the ball. We've seen Jake Myers get hot here and there. And, so that's, the hot hand needs to be in the game until you get someone that takes the bull by the horns and runs with it and has a hot streak for a long period of time. That's how you become an everyday player. But, the Astros just don't have that personnel right now. And so, I think maybe Zach does make it because he's hitting so well. And listen, it's going to be a revolving door anyways. This isn't going to be a situation that, you have the 6-man roster at the beginning of the season, and then you're going to stick with that. It's going to change. It's going to change just like it always has.
Exactly. Sanjay says, what are the chances of Zach hitting 300 this year, just like he did in Sugarland? Well,
slim to none.
I would not put him at look, honestly, if Zach DeCenzo can give you 260 to 270 and he can put double-digit home runs up, he can hit doubles, maybe he can steal some bases with his speed, he can make some key plays in the outfield. That's a lot better than what Chaz has given you the last couple seasons.
Here's the problem. When you put the second deck on the stadiums, so that means you get out of spring training, all of a sudden the sliders are a little bit crisper. They're a little bit sharper. The fastball has a little bit more hop on it. It's a hitting in the regular season and hitting in spring training. You're in stadiums. You're not outside in the bright light of the sun all the time. I mean, there's a lot of difference that goes on once you get into the regular season. So, I think if you can just if he could just get some consistent at bats and have some quality at bats, then you can feel okay for it. But you got to remember, big league average has plummeted over the last couple of years. You're talking about a league that only hits 240.
And here's the thing. If Zach DeCenzo replaces Chaz McCormick, where a lot of people think he's going to end up going, he's only been at first and third base.
Yeah.
And he's actually a negative outs above average in both positions. I think his athletic ability and his height probably plays to his advantage. He seems to be a very athletic player there, Mike.
Yeah.
And look, I remember the year that we celebrated the 2022 World Series opening day the next year, was asked to go out on the field with some friends. Eric and I got to hold the flag during opening day. And I remember walking on the field at the time Minute Maid Park and holding that flag on my shoulder and looking up and thinking to myself, I'm going to have a hard time booing any more major league players because I don't know how they come out here and how they play on this field. I'm telling you, that was the most awe-inspiring, intimidating atmosphere. The stands were packed. And Minute Maid Park or Daikin Park looks way more intimidating when you're on the field and you realize how small you are. And so now you take that and you throw that onto Cam Smith. You throw that onto these new guys, even like Logan Van Wy, who I think is going to be phenomenal. And it is a whole different ball game. You're right. I like the second deck comment because spring training is spring training. It's around spring break. It's more relaxed. It's a joyful time,
The veteran
no pressure,
pitchers,
really.
they're working on things. They're just trying to get an arm slot. They're,
Right.
when you get to the regular season, okay, boys, it's time to strap on the chin strap. Now it's time to get to work.
And now they're
spring
going to have
training.
the book.
Just to go to the financial side of this, spring training, you're not earning any money. You don't
That's
start
true.
earning money until opening day, and now all of a sudden, the game is real.
That's true. That's true. And it's funny. I talked to Ben. I talked to Ben Verlander about this, and he told me off air how much money he didn't make when he was in the minor leagues, and how, when you're in the minor leagues and you're not one of the top prospects, and then you want to go get training, you still have to pay for training.
Oh, sure,
it's not cheap.
Sure, you do.
People don't just be like, oh yeah, we're going to train you for free. Like, and I was just like, I was blown away. Like in his 5-year period, he showed me how much he made, and I was like, I was astonished.
They make more than when I was in the minor leagues, but when and it's not a crazy amount more. When I was in AAA, I made $850 before taxes. That was that was a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you say you want to be a baseball player.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. You learn, the old college thing, you live on ramen.
Yeah.
Minor leagues, you kind of do.
That's right. That's right. Now, a cool thing happened this week. We had the City Connect uniforms come out 2.0.
I kind of dig them.
I like them a lot. I don't think they look like softball uniforms.
I love the shooting star.
Yes,
that's one of my favorite, vintage Astros uniforms. So yes, I like the stadium, or the new uniforms. Yeah, the problem I had with the old, and it wasn't a problem. I never had to wear them, so I could sit back and say whatever I want. Was the pants? The pants were what made it look like a softball uniform. They were all the dark navy, blue,
right.
But I still, to tell you the truth, my favorite Astros hat was the old City Connect. That is my favorite Astros hat. And I thought the jerseys were nice. If they would put them on white pants, that would have been great. But they did the blue pants and the number on the hip. And so
here's the picture of Altuve wearing it. Of course, I love the short pants that he wears. It's just perfect with the socks.
Yeah, are those City Connect socks?
Yes.
Yes, afterburner socks. I like it.
Very cool. So you got that, and then also on the lower part of the jersey, it says, "We don't do it. We don't do these things because they're easy. We do these things because they're hard." Taking off of the JFK, talking about going to the moon.
That's right.
I don't know. Did you see the hype video? The hype video was really cool. It talked about,
I missed the video.
So it was so it's actually Jim Nantz, and Jim Nantz says the moon is where we started, but that's not where we ended. Like we have so much more further to go.
Yeah.
What we'll have to do, because I actually have it. I'll queue it up for next show. We'll play it. I got permission from the Astros to show it on the podcast, but Jim Nantz does a cool job doing the reveal, and so I'm excited about that. Now, talking about City Connect 2.0, now we have New York coming back to Houston, in the form of the Mets, with the $750 trillion man Juan Soto. For a second year in a row, we face Juan Soto, where Framber Valdez has been announced as the opening day starter.
Right.
Hunter Brown has been announced as the number 2 starter. I'm assuming Arrighetti gets the 3rd spot. But what do you think about seeing Juan Soto now with Lindor, with Alonso on the Mets? This guy's gotten paid. I mean, we're facing him again. What do you think opening day is going to entail for the Astros versus the guys from Queens?
Well, listen, if Framber's got his 2-seam fastball going, who cares? Hit the ball as hard as you want. You can't get under it anyways, so just wear out the infield grass. And listen, this was a terrible contract as soon as the ink hit the paper. Okay, this is a brutal contract. It is. There's no way it's going to work out. Okay, there's just not. because when you look at Juan Soto as a player, and by the way, there is no deferred money in this contract. This is a 15-year contract. So, divided by 15, that's what he's getting paid. Whereas you looked at the $700 million contract of Shohei Ohtani, there was a large portion of that was deferred. If you remember, Shohei Ohtani is only getting paid $2 million a year for 10 years. So in year 11, he starts getting paid the rest of the, what is it? It's $680 million, whatever it is. And I think he gets paid for the next 10 years after that. So he said, he's getting $68 million a year for 10 years.
So Mike, I remember as a young baseball enthusiast, as a young baseball fan, baseball player, freaking out and hearing about George Brett and Ricky Henderson and Nolan Ryan and these guys making $3 million. Yeah. I remember my dad saying, nobody's worth $1 million. Nobody's worth $3 million.
Right.
And now, since we're talking about this, it's insane. The Blue Jays had offered Vladimir Guerrero Jr. $450 million. He says this week, my floor is $500 million. I'm like, what are we doing here?
I have two words, one name to say to Vladdy Jr. Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman said, now it was $200 million. It wasn't $500 million, but he put a big floor and he never got to that floor. Now, you can't really say that Alex has lost it because, you have to wait until it's all said and done. Now, he's still getting paid. What is he getting paid? $35 or $40 million a year for 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. He's got outs in the, he's got options to get out of the contract, all that kind of stuff. So you have to wait and see what the next contract looks like to see if he actually lost the money. But my goodness gracious. Yeah. Hey, listen, I want $500 million also.
I do
no,
too.
It don't mean I'm going to get it.
I just like at some point, because from what I understand, it really does sound like the owner's going to try to get a salary cap, and if they do, the players are going to push back on it.
Not going to happen.
You don't think it's going to happen?
No, not going to happen.
Because do you think, let's just say nuclear scenario, baseball has another lockout. Does it hurt the owners in baseball more to lock out and be that curmudgeon, or are they girded up, by their loins enough that they don't care and they'll take the hit?
Okay. So I went through the strike of 94, the lockout, the strike / lockout of 94. And I think that we came pretty close to losing the sport.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
It didn't come back immediately. It actually took 1998, and what put baseball back on the map was the Mark McGwire home run chase.
Yes.
McGwire and Sammy Sosa. That is what got everybody excited about baseball. But you got to remember, that was 4 years later. Mm-hmm. That was the goal of ownership at that time, was we are going to break the union. Well, it didn't work out. Okay. It won't work out this time either. Now, the problem is that you have an industry that is worth a lot more money than it was back in 1994. Okay.
Oh, a ton.
This is a what, $10-12 billion industry, annual industry. So there's a lot more at stake here. There's a lot more at risk here. And, what we've always said as players is, listen, it's not our fault that you are signing Juan Soto for $760 million. You're the ones that did it, Yeah. So, if you're not going to be in it, that was one of the things that they wanted the players to make the owners fiscally responsible. That's not our job. That's their job. And here's the thing that people need to understand. And this is the old union rep in me talking. The portion of the pie that goes to the players has been reduced, even with these big contracts, has been reduced over the last couple decades. You know, you go back to 1994, 1995, that front time frame. Players were getting, and players, I mean, as a whole, they were getting roughly 24% of the pie.
Okay.
So yeah, so about a quarter. Okay, it's gone below 20%. So
Yeah,
even though everybody's getting paid, you know, all the big name players are getting paid, the portion of the pie for the players on the field from the industry has actually gone down.
Yeah, and I think I saw where the Pittsburgh Pirates a couple years ago made like $2.1 billion and they were like the last place team. I'm like,
Right.
Hold on. How?
Well, that's all the revenue sharing. This is a very, very complex situation.
It
all
is.
the revenue sharing. Right. And to tell you the truth, the teams that fight for this the hardest are usually the bigger market teams because they're the ones that are doing all the paying, whether it's luxury tax or whatever.
Right.
You know, and that money gets dispersed to the smaller market teams. So if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates, you know, and they've got a $30 million payroll or $50 million payroll compared to, you know, the Dodgers, you know, $7 billion payroll. Why would they want, you know, because there was also never any stipulation of how that money had needed to be spent, that they had to turn around and put it right back into player development or put it right back into salaries. You know, you could give your CEOs and all your top brass in the organization big Christmas bonuses.
Exactly.
You know, there was never any stipulation of how that money needed to be spent.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, and we won't get into it tonight, but
by the way, if you can't tell, you kind of got me on a soapbox here.
Hey, I like it because you bring, you know, your knowledge and understanding of the game from actually being in the game. To me is valuable. I mean, I love to sit back and listen to it because it's there, and it may be all fair. I have a lot of questions about my favorite era of baseball, which is known as the steroid era. Mark McGwire was my favorite player growing up. I am looking at a Cardinals jersey that he signed for me in the Astrodome. I've got a program signed by him from Enron Field, you know, all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
But one of the things I want us to tackle in the coming weeks is this conundrum that's happening in Tampa with the stadium getting destroyed.
Yeah.
You know, where the stadium was set up by the governor of Florida to be a disaster relief, and then it got destroyed. And then they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, we're not going to repair the stadium. And I'm like, so you're playing in a minor league park. And then I look at things like Banana Ball. Savannah Bananas go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers stadium and they sell it out. And the Tampa Bay opening day Devil Rays is not even sold out in a spring training.
In Legends Field. Yeah.
Legends Field. So there's some things I want to talk to you about Tampa, about the future of Tampa, the future. Do you see baseball going to different cities? But we've got a lot of stuff to talk about, guys. And this season, we are going to delve more into the major leagues, not just Houston Astros, because Mike, I think there's a lot of really neat storylines that we need to follow.
Yes. This has a chance of being it's going to be a fascinating season.
It is,
to say the least. And, you know, odds on favorite for the World Series. Well, it's got to be the Dodgers. I mean, my gosh, they've got an all-star team. Problem is, usually the best team doesn't win. So we'll have to wait and see if somebody else in the National League can represent.
Yeah, and, come on, Dodgers. If you can't win that 116th game one more game than the Mariners did, and they didn't have half the team you had, come on now, what are we doing here? But seriously, Mike, this has been great. I'm looking forward to all the shows this week, and we'll probably be bringing on some guests. Sure. I've been talking to some former players that you're connected with. We're going to try to get them plugged into the show. It'll be a great season, but, you know, we're looking forward to Astros opening day coming up on the 27th, literally 7 days away from when I'm talking the first game of the season will have already been done and over with at 10:47 on the 27th. But thank y'all for tuning in. From myself, everybody here at Back to the Bullpen, from Ram Shirts, from State of the Art Barbershop, thank y'all for tuning in. And make sure you subscribe. Make sure you tell everybody about our show. And y'all have a good one. We'll talk to you later.
Adios.
I'm looking to the bullpen to bring my lefty in. Keep the lead and make your team look pedestrian. It's in your wheelhouse, we'll swing for the fence. You know it's money around here, and I ain't talking expense. Strike one, heat low in the way, you can't hit it. You know you wanna start a rally, but you better forget it. Strike two, off speed, same spot, your car looking. Get ready at the plate, this time you're not cooking. Strike three, swinging out of the zone. You ain't even touch it first. Tell me how they gonna drive you home.